All right, greetings everyone. Lou here from GreenSea, the project manager for Special Operations Technologies. In today's how-to video, we're going to cover logging. We're going to cover how do you actually apply the application, why we generally would do it, and some of the outputs that it provides. So logging is nothing more than a recorded file that's provided on the RNAV when logging is turned on. This can provide a few different outputs. It'll provide a sonar view of if you had sonar plugged in. You can do an actual MP4 playback to see if you had an obstacle. It also provides the unique file that we're going to be talking about later on is the telemetry file. And the telemetry file is going to provide diver input, what they did from the beginning to the end, from the time they started logs to the time they turned it off. Furthermore, through the engineering tool that we have that we go through, we can also see button inputs. Specific parts of the dive, our engineers can actually look at and say the diver hit this button, the diver hit this button. It also is used as a navigation tool to see, how the DPD and the RNAV performed while the diver was on it, driving. You're able to look at, hey, what the max velocity was, what the INS solution was, how much pitch and roll they had, how off they were from course, so on and so forth. We can also see what kind of INS solution was given, what actual parameters were used, whether it was DVL, gyro, compass, and then we can also see how they integrated. One of the things, unique tools that we use logging for also, which a lot of our customers use, is when divers are starting to have issues. Whether it's self-induced or whether it's the actual software, or hardware, something went wrong, it was dropped, or something's loose. Generally, you guys will call me and say, "Hey, Lou, I have this issue," and it's like, "Great, you're describing it to me. I need something a little more so I can help diagnose that without you having to send me the RNAV or trying to replicate it. I'm just going to ask you for a log." And the logging, whether you're in the water or you saw the problem outside of the water, pretty much all you do is you turn on the log and just try to replicate it again. Whether that, let's say it's a compass that's just going in at 360 degrees and it doesn't stop, it's actually, hey, turn logging on. And then turn logging off, and then we'll be able to, from there, our engineers will be able to look at it and be like, yep, this is what happened, this is what was going, there's some weird magnetic pull, or the hardware seems faulty, or something's broken, or something's loose, which doesn't happen very often, but that's just what we'll ask just for a log. Also, when divers need a little bit of help, Lou, diver X was off 50 meters, he's always off, can you look at his logs? Absolutely, I'll be able to look at it and be able to tell, like, yep, he had a lot of pitch and roll, and this is what he had. He was a little shaky there. He didn't do a compass calibration, so he was off by a few meters here and there. It's a great application when used in that kind of supervisor role, because it's hard really to diagnose a diver's pitch and roll from the surface or from a pier. You really have to be on it and really looking at the instruments to make sure that everything stays within tolerance. So the way that we're going to do it is we're going to pretty much left trigger down. It'll bring up your menu option, or you can hit bezel button number 4, which is going to be your menu bar. So from here, here's your main menu, and you guys are familiar with a lot of these. You're going to go down to System, and we're going to go to Logging. Then from there, we're going to click on Logging, and then we're going to toggle over, and then left trigger up. And then from there, you'll see Logging come in the corner. So if I ask you to log or give me a log, and you're like, Lou, I was logging, which happens a lot, it's just like, no, you wasn't. Unless you see this in the corner, that means that you missed one of those steps. So you just go back and do it. So now logging. So while it's logging, everything that happens on that screen is going to be recorded. Whether the RNAV, as you guys see right now, the RNAV, the compass is moving. That's all recorded. Going to be recorded in the files, the nav solution. Even if I have no mission selected. One of the common questions is, when do I start logging? So you want to start logging generally right before you start your mission. Before you do your compass cal, start the log so you can get a beginning to end. You want to go all the way to the end, to the point where that specific mission is over. The reason for that is because we don't want an overly exorbitant large file, because then once we put it in the engineering tool, we're going to have to cut it. And if you have an issue during the middle or 3/4 of the way through the dive, it's going to be really hard for me to try to find where that issue was. And I could be cutting the wrong spot, or the file is just way too large for me to look at the whole thing. Imagine 4 or 5 hours of diving and trying to look at one file for one specific thing that you said you saw on the RNAV. So that's why we ask, hey, from insert to extract, or once you get to actions on, hey, once you're done, just stop the logs. If you're doing some training and you do the insert to the objective and the buddy's driving it back, hey, just stop the log, and then once your buddy gets on, have him start a second log. So this way, if you have no problems, but your buddy has a problem, then I'll be able to diagnose his specific file. So while it's logging, So you'll see it in there. And if you want to turn it off once you're done at the end of the day, or if you're done with that specific mission, you can do the same exact thing. You can left trigger down, or you can select menu. You're going to go back down to system. You can toggle down system. From there, you'll come on over to logging. And then from there, you're just going to turn off and then left trigger up, and you'll see logging go off. So that means that I'm no longer logging. So right now, as you guys see at the screen that the compass is moving, that input or that recorded file will not be anywhere, so I won't be able to see it. So that's why I asked that, hey, if you guys are having some sort of issue, that, hey, just give me a good log, of it, and then we'll cover what that would look like, future dives. For a lot of the customers out there, I do get very, very often, they're hitting me up. It's like, Luke, can you look at this? Can you look at that? Absolutely, that's part of my job. And I'm always happy to continue, guys, the warfighters, continue diving. So now we're going to cover how do we pull the logs and what kind of output we get. All right, guys. So once you have your file, it's actually on the RNAV. You started logging. You're sure that you was logging, and you actually turned the logging off. From there, you're going to plug in your mission planning laptop through the Ethernet and 8-pin connector, and then we're going to pull logs. So we're going to cover exactly how to pull logs, which is really, really simple. And then from there, we're going to look at some of the outputs that we get, what we get from it. So once we're here, if you guys know, this is the general workspace. I'm in my mission planning laptop. Everybody knows we can hit setup. We go to setup, and then in this button, you're going to see this cool little tab that says pull logs from RNAV 2. So whatever we recorded on the RNAV, all the logs are going to go right in there. So I'm going to hit it. You're going to see it connecting to host, and you're going to start seeing these cool little outputs. Mind you, I don't have sonar connected, but it still will produce a file that says just, hey, it's 0. You're going to have a few other files that it's going to work through that is saying it's going to download. While it's working through its process, I do want to cover that logging is very, very, very good tool and application for it, especially when we start talking about issues with the RNAV, or if you think there's an issue with the RNAV. So I can't harp on how important it is to, hey, just provide a log. You can either push it to me, Dropbox it to me, so on and so forth. But as you guys start seeing, it's going to start with the telemetry file, the sonar, and the sonar scan, GSS spin, which are all general outputs. The sizes obviously vary because there is no sonar plugged in. But once it goes through, it should close out by itself, and then we'll go look at the magic of the output. I do have some logs that we can look at, so you guys can see some general output. And then so it'll close out. So now I'm just going to close Workspace. And then I'm going to open up my STID mission planning folders, as we talked about in multiple videos. Bring this up. And then you're going to have, like we always talk about, you're going to have your primary STID mission folders, and you're going to have these archives. So this is critical if you don't have the archives, or if you said that you wouldn't need them, especially when you start pulling logs. If you've already pushed me a few logs, there's no reason for you to decipher what log is what. You just drop them in the archive, and in case you need them, you always have them as a good reference. But the most recent logs are going to be in the STID logs folder. So here's some general outputs. I may have downloaded it beforehand. There were some folders in here actually as well. So I'm going to do it, just orientate it by date. So here's the general output. Here's an MP4, so if you did have sonar, you can actually play it back through MP4. This is the general telemetry GSS bin, and this is the file that I'm going to be looking at, that I'm going to be asking for. So if I ask for a file, this is the file, the telemetry file is what I'm looking for. You can go in there, just don't change the ending of it, but you can actually rename it, especially if you have multiple RNAVs and you want to decipher what RNAV is what. So I'm going to say RNAV 136. You can change the date. You can change to dive 1. Dive 1. There you go. So now it's RNAV 136 dive 1, and you push me that file. If you're having a sonar issue specifically, I may be asking you for the MP4 issue, MP4 file, but that's not a big thing. We can probably diagnose from there. But now we're going to open up. We're going to show you what the engineering tool that we have that we use to diagnose, and some of the outputs that you get from it. So it's this cool little bar. It's called OpenSea Analysis, and it's going to open up. Here we go. So first, we're going to select the log for analysis. And mind you, this is Greensea's tool. A lot of the stuff in here you don't need, but these are the outputs that we're going to get. It's going to be roughly about eight files that we're gonna push out. Some of them are going to be irrelevant to you, but some will be quite critical. So from there, we'll select a file and drop it in, and I'll show you what actual actual navigation run would actually look like. All right, guys. So we have the general outputs of what what we're looking at. So the first file we'll look at is going to, which I find the most critical, is going to be position analysis, northing and easting. This is going to show me when and where you had a GPS fix, and it's also going to show me your position error. From your position error, you have a really large position error, then I can start pulling the thread to figure out where or what caused what. So here, if you guys look at it, the green is actually the start, blue is actually where we had a GPS fix. So it looks like I was doing some transit alignment, and then ended up putting my antenna right down, and then from there I went, the black line reflects the INS solution, no GPS. So after this long run, you're going to see this little crosshair. You have a pink crosshair and a blue crosshair. So pretty much where I surfaced, this is where I surfaced and got a GPS fix, and the red is pretty much saying where I actually was at once I had my fix, where the RNAV thought it was. So then we measure that distance, and it comes out to 3.3 meters. So roughly I was off just about 9 feet on this. I believe it's like a 2.5 kilometer run. So then I just drove it in, and the red dot reflects nothing more than when I stopped logs. So for position error, yeah, for a long run, I'd say, yeah, that's close to acceptable. Obviously I like to be in lower, I like to be in the ones. But if it was a short run, I'd probably say, yeah, I may want to rethink about what I did for positioning. All right, so next we're going to see, like we said, there's a lot of graphs, a lot of engineering tools here. This is nothing more than another northing and easting over time. Really, this is more of an engineering application than anything. From there, we'll go to temperature and gyro drift analysis. The IMU temperature pretty much is this straight blue line. This is all I'd look at. If there's a specific spike, that means that there was some sort of issue with the IMU and this calibration into the temperature that it was involved in. Generally, you'll see stuff like that when you're really in a cold building, or you're in a really warm building where the RNAV is, and then you immediately drop it in some really cold water, you're going to see some actually issues. Which as you guys know, we want to sort of calibrate the RNAV to its water temperature environment for at least 20 minutes, which is generally what we do. Especially if it's close, then it's probably minimize that time. So for velocity is another output that we'll get. Northing and easting dot is an engineering tool, but for me, I'm going to look at what the speed over ground was. This is recorded in meters over seconds for velocity. So here it looks like I peaked out at probably 1.7.5, roughly 3.1 knots, give or take. Moving on, or manage a little bit of depth. So looking at depth, yep, looks like depth. So at the bottom, we're looking at elapsed time over seconds. So this from here to here, it's 50 seconds. Looks like this would be the surface run, dove, and then what we'd look at from there. So pitch and roll. So pitch and roll, this is one of the greatest applications that we're using to help diagnose issues. Some pitch and roll is allowed, obviously understanding that 20 degrees plus or minus is our max tolerance. But I can tell when you're on the surface, you're going to have a lot more pitch, and then when if you're on the surface, depending on where you're at in turns, you may have some excessive roll. But overall, that's just one of the engineering applications that we'll look at. From here, we pull out this GPS horizontal dilution of positioning. Blue line reflects, when it's low, it reflects that you had a GPS, correlates to GPS fix. In our software, whenever a number reflects 666, it means that was no longer recording or no longer applicable, meaning that there was no GPS fix from this point to this point. And from here, we got a GPS fix, and then we lost it again. And from here, one of the critical tools when we start talking about specific hardware, software issues is when I'm going to go to this screen. From here, I can actually look at what the compass was doing, what the INS solution is, if you guys look at it in this red, this is pretty much going to say like, hey, this is what the RNAV was predicting for your nav solution, which you should have followed. And then the compass should pretty much be following it, as pretty much almost mirroring it, overlapping it. There's certain times when you won't, when you come off autopilot and you're driving it handheld, which it looks at, but generally you want it to overlap just like this sequence here. The yellow will reflect the alignment that was actually used. And then you have actual FOM, and the FOM that was used highlighted by the green and the purple. So these are just some application tools that we'll look at as well. Not that I wanted to continue going down that rabbit hole. But yeah, so please, if you have any questions or anything like that, please push me to logs like we reflected again. Whenever you guys are diving and you guys want some start logging and you guys have issues, please just hit me up, push me the log and be like, hey Lou, this is what I saw. What do you think? And I can actually provide you some good input. Thank you for listening and watching. You guys have a great day and safe diving.